Hi, I'm Country. Welcome to my channel. Hi. If you knew me and my bookstagram back in 2017, you would know that I was crazy obsessed with Six of Crows. Okay, it was like those two books, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, they were my entire personality during that time, those years. Soon after that, I read more of Leigh Bardugo's works, and she became like one of my favorite authors. I absolutely love her work. She's like an autobiography for me. Like, I would read whatever she writes, whatever she publishes, whatever she comes up with. And I've read all of her books. Like, all of her books except Hellbent. I haven't read Hellbent yet. I don't know why. But except that, I've read all of her books. Even the DC Wonder Woman book that she came out with, I think in 2019 or 2020, I don't remember. I even read that, okay? And most people do not remember that. So I'm a fan. I'm a big fan, okay? And when she came out with her new book, The Familiar, early this year, I knew I had to read it, especially because it was marketed as an adult, her foray into adult literature, and I knew I had to read it because she's one of my favorite authors, and she was coming up with a new book which was not set in the whole Six Sharon Bone world, or like the duology, Ninth House duology. So this was going to be like one of her newer ventures into another world, right? And it is a standalone, so I was excited. I was pretty excited, although it is historical fiction and I'm not a very big fan of historical fiction, but I don't care. I did not care. It's Leigh Bardugo. I had to read it, okay? I kept the book aside for months. I read it finally in June, and here I am with a video talking about it, my opinions, because I have a lot of them. I would like to first say a big thank you to Penguin Random House India for sending me a review copy of this book. I literally begged them. Before we move forward, can I just show you my absolute amazing art on the title page? Like, so we have a main character who is Lucia Cotado. Disclaimer though, I'm gonna butcher this name pronunciations because I'm bad with them and I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Lucia or Lucia? For the sake of my own pronunciation, I'm going to call it Lucia. So we have our main character Lucia, who has magical powers, okay? And she is an orphan. She works in a shabby house. But when her mistress discovers her powers, right, she basically uses Lucia as an entertainment piece to get more people to come to their house and basically, elevate their status in the society. However, when her powers are discovered by the wrong people, she is basically thrust into the world of nobility and power and deception, where she has to basically fight for a place in the in the royal court. There is also her ancestry that comes into play, which she has to hide and basically conceal her identity in order to be safe, and she does this with the help of the Familiar. I cannot pronounce his name, so I'm not even going to say. Basically, that is the whole story. When it comes to the plot, right, there were things that I don't know, it just did not interest me as much. On paper, it's a very interesting plot. Like there's this girl with power, she's thrust into nobility, she's thrust into the world where she does not belong, and then she has to fight for her own self there. And it is set in the backdrop of the Spain's golden age, which makes it a bit much more interesting. When it comes to that, the overall plot becomes very intriguing because there is magic, there is reality, and then there is also a lot of like I don't know what to call it, games, plays, like superstitions, a lot of these playing on, okay? So it became like a mesh of history as well as fantasy, and it created a very like profound plot. In classic Leigh Bardugo style, the story starts very slowly. It proceeds very gradually as we're introduced to Lucia's like mistress first, and then her powers, and then gradually, like, you know, it goes on to the others discovering her powers because she was like being very careless with it, and then, you know, the whole royal court thing coming into play. But a lot of the first half of the book just went about in that aspect, okay, which, like, I kept waiting for it to build up and build up and build up, and then it did build up. But when the middle part came, right, when she was in the game, basically she had to play like 3 levels of games in order to like be in the royal court, like be chosen. She was playing against, I think, 3 or other 2 people, and that part was quite boring. Did not interest me at all. It was not interesting, and I found myself like flicking through the pages as fast as I could because there were details that I did not care about. I do not care about these games because I know that whatever happens, either she's going to be beaten up and then be a victor, or she's just going to like absolutely ruin the other 2 contestants in the game and she's going to be the victor. Either way, I was not very wrong. In that manner, right, the middle part just did not hold any value for me while I was reading. Like, the first half was interesting because I wanted to see how Lucia, you know, comes about controlling her powers, or how she uses the help of the familiar, what she's discovering about herself. But when it came to the middle part and she was in the royal court competing against these other players, against these other forms of magic, it just did not feel very interesting. Like, I did not care about it. I did not care about those games. The stakes were not very high and it just felt flat. However, when it came to the end of the book, like the end of the plot, it picked up. It picked up really well, and then at the end, if the end did not happen, I probably would have given it a 4-star, but the end happened and I was not happy about it. But it's not just the plot, you know. One of the main things that bothered me a lot was the structure of the plot and the base of the plot that I have seen being done over and over and over again. And I kid you not, after having read so many of Leigh Bardugo's work, I could not help but notice the similarity across her plots. Let me give you an example, okay? So we have here in the familiar a girl, an orphan, who comes from poor background, who works in a poor shabby house. She has magical powers that she discovers, and she doesn't have full control over them. The magical powers are discovered by some other person, and then she is basically taken to the royal court where she is working with a familiar who is a dark, brooding, mystical figure who is also immortal, by the way. And then she falls for him, and we've read this before, haven't we? So that was my problem, you know. While I was reading The Familiar, I just could not help connect it with Shadow and Bone. Like, there were so many similarities with Shadow and Bone that you just cannot overlook it. You know, the whole orphan thing, the power thing discovered by some nobility, then thrust into this noble world to save something, or, you know, to become this hero, and then falling for the dark, brooding character, of course, who's also immortal, by the way, and then blah blah blah, whatever. So this was my issue in, you know, while I was reading the first half of the book. Like, it felt so similar to Shadow and Bone, except that, you know, The Familiar was more adult. It is more enhanced and had a much more like stylistic way to the story. Just can't help but notice these small things about the plot, you know, this whole baseline that is so similar. Now let's talk about the romance. Okay, Familiar's romance was much more than her other books and series. Naturally, the focus was on the main 2 characters, you know, but I absolutely did not like the romance. I thought the chemistry was missing big time. The thing is, right from the beginning, you know that these 2 characters are going to fall in love, and something is going to happen between them. It was very obvious, okay, and it's fine, okay, you have these romantic partners in the book and people are supposed to ship them and love them, which is fine. But in The Familiar, I felt like it was so forced, so shoved down our throats that it just did not feel natural. And the other thing was that the romance was quite abrupt. Like, in one chapter we see like her basically training with her familiar and literally having no sort of romantic feelings or emotions or even thoughts about it, and then the next chapter she's like, oh my god, take me. I would have loved to see a little bit more slow burn between them maybe. It was not for me. Like, I tried really hard to, I don't know, maybe become a bit warmed up to them. I tried a lot to actually love them and like them, but I did not. And this brings me to the last end of the book, where again a lot of similarities with Shadow and Bone again. So basically, in Ruin and Rising, the Darkling is defeated by Alina, and then Alina and Mal basically live together happily ever after, although Alina loses her powers, right? In the Familiar, what happens is basically the both of them, Lucia and the Familiar, they are both put up in fires and burned alive because of the whole magic and using dark magic, basically all that thing. And you would like to think that they would die, and that is where it ends, you know, in a very Shakespearean tragedy-esque. I know that people like happy endings, especially in books like these, but somehow it feels like, you know, if the ending was that tragedy, the book would have just been so much better. If that would have happened, I would have loved it. I would have eaten that shit up, because it would have been such a perfect and very emotional, very fitting end to the book somehow. I don't know, it just felt very fitting to just end it there. But of course, no, there was an epilogue where they survive. Maybe it is my own expectations that I had with the book and why I was left a little bit disappointed. I don't know, I was expecting the romance to be a bit more, I don't know, with more stakes maybe, because the book literally had no like stakes. There were literally very less points where I was scared, where I felt some form of care for the main character or her whole, you know, story, the plot that was going on, or even with any deaths that happened throughout the story. It just felt like maybe because it's a standalone, maybe she is much more used to writing series and duologies. Maybe that's why this book was a bit of rush, because there were so many things that had to be packed in this small thing, right? Because it was a standalone, and a historical fiction with fantasy in a standalone sometimes could get very, you know, difficult to put everything in one book. These were the main things that bothered me, you know. The book had a lot of highs and then it came down a lot. Like, it just went up and the graph just kept on going up and down, and then it was like stagnant, and then it went up and then it went down and it was stagnant again. When it happens with a book, especially by your favorite author, it becomes very difficult, especially for me, on how to judge it, because at one end I think the writing was phenomenal. This book proves that Leigh Bardugo's writing has matured so much, because if you compare it to her first book, Shadow and Bone, and even her latest book, Ninth House and Hellbent, you can see the advancement in her writing style and the way that she has written about like the characters, the prose, basically about the situations, about the environment at that period of time, and the emotions that were portrayed in the books were phenomenally done. And I have to commend Bardugo for it, because her writing is just exceptionally beautiful, and that is one aspect that I really adore about her. Apart from the exceptional writing, I also have to mention that the book has a lot of different themes and elements that were very prominent throughout the story. I think one of the most prominent idea was of identity that played a huge role, especially when it came to Lucia's identity, you know, historical identity, cultural identity, and how it played a role in forming her character, basically, and how she performed her magic, what she did, and how she acted. Identity played a huge part, because even when it came to the familiar, right, the brooding immortal dude, even when it came to him, identity played a huge part, because when you learn his story and how he came to be what he came to be, it was a lot to do about who he was, how he was trying to become and what he was trying to what he was struggling with and everything. So a lot of it had to do with identity. The other theme that was very prominent was of oppression and power. Right from the beginning, you see the oppression playing a huge role in Lucia's life and her basically actions. She comes from a poor background. She works in a shabby household that has literally very little to pay her, and she literally, it was mentioned that she sleeps in the dirt, and that plays a huge role because oppression, even when she gets the whole treatment from the royal court, that she's trained in magic, she has magic and she gets the special treatment, even then she is not herself. Like, she does not have any autonomy because her actions are dictated by the familiar and by what she has to do to win the favor of the royal court. She is still oppressed irrespective of how much power she has, because no matter how much you try to elevate your position through various means, oppression never ends. And it was very prominent in Lucia's case. Like, yes, it felt like she had autonomy, that she was doing what she wanted to do, but at the same time she was doing it for and because she was thrust into this world, she was forced into this world, and she had to do something to survive. Familiar is an adult book, right? And the writing really reflects that, with the way the emotions were portrayed, with the way that the different characters' personality was portrayed in the book or the story. It just came out. It was like something very unique to themselves and spoke to the readers in a very profound manner. However, a writing alone cannot save the book, right? There has to be all these elements together that has to make a book good enough for the reader to like. And when it comes to me, I judge a book based on a lot of factors. The writing may be one, but if all the other aspects are bad, I don't know. Yes, I love the writing. I loved how the whole story was packed into this very profound, very flowy, very flowery, metaphorical prose. But at the same time, I was not big into the whole plot. It was interesting, yes, but there were also so many boring parts, and I didn't know what to do with them. I just flicked through, as I said. Something just did not sit right with me. Like, maybe it was the romance, maybe it was the character, maybe it was the plot overall, or maybe because I was in my head just seeing so many similarities with her previous books that I just could not enjoy it to the fullest. Okay, and the similarities are not bad, but when it keeps repeating the same manner in different fonts, it just becomes very wide to be unnoticeable. Overall, I am quite confused about what I feel about the book, because as I said, it's by one of my favorite authors, and this was one of my most anticipated releases of this year. But at the same time, as I also said, the book had a lot of highs but also a lot of lows for me. While I enjoyed it, there were a lot of parts where I did not, and I skipped those. Like, I went through them very fast. And when it comes to that, I don't know what to exactly feel about the book. I was so conflicted, right? Did I enjoy this book at all, or is my love and adoration for the author clouding my judgment of the book? And it could be that. I have no idea. I would say that The Familiar is a very, very well written book. I have to commend Leigh Bardugo for her writing and prose, because it's absolutely beautiful. There are so many lines, so many sentences, so many quotes that I underlined that just spoke so much to me, and it can also lead to so many discussions. Like, one of them was about language, one of them was also about darkness, that I completely remember, and how people are, irrespective of their hierarchies or their statuses in darkness, everyone is equal in darkness. And that is such a beautiful thought to talk about or discuss and start a discussion with anyone, basically. And the book has a lot of such examples of beautiful prose, beautiful quotes, beautiful sentences. So in that aspect, go for it. This is an amazing book. However, I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't know what I felt for this book. It left me very confused and in a big dilemma, because at the one end, I absolutely enjoyed the writing, but at the other end, there were so many things that I just could not overlook and completely enjoy it. So yeah, there you go, a very incomprehensive mess of a review of The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found, I don't know, something. I hope you understood something of it. If you've read the book, let me know if we share some similar thoughts or if you felt something different from me. If you haven't read the new book, let me know if you've read any other book by Leigh Bardugo and if you enjoy it. And if you haven't read any book by her, I would suggest you read Six of Crows because it's one of my absolute favorite books of all time. I've read it like 8 times and I love it every time. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will see you in the next one. Bye!